Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching Eagle News International. On tonight's headlines. Russia and Ukraine agreed on a day-long ceasefire around a series of evacuation corridors to allow civilians to escape the fighting. U.S. intelligence chiefs branded Russia's Vladimir Putin an angry, isolated leader, craving global clout, frustrated about how his Ukraine invasion has not gone to plan, and lobbying provocative nuclear threats at the West. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he is no longer pressing for NATO membership for Ukraine, a delicate issue that was one of Russia's stated reasons for invading its pro-Western neighbor. First in our news, Russia and Ukraine today agreed a day-long ceasefire around a series of evacuation corridors to allow civilians to escape the fighting. That, according to Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk. Vereshchuk says Moscow and Ukraine vowed to respect the truce from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Let's take a look.
Ми отримали повідомлення від Російської Федерації щодо погодження раніше запропонованих нами маршрутів, у напрямках яких я зараз перерахую, а також повідомлення Міжнародного Червоного Хреста про направлення листа на їхнє ім'я з таким погодженням. Ми направили свого листа до Міжнародного комітету Червоного Хреста, і о 9 годині ранку відбувається розмова нашого прем'єр-міністра Шмигаля Дениса Анатолійовича з керівником Пітером Майером, керівником Міжнародного комітету Червоного Хреста, на предмет підтвердження такого погодження. Військові погоджуються припинити вогонь з 9 годин до 21 години поточного дня.
Ms. Vereshchuk said Moscow vowed to respect this truce again from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. around 6 areas that have been heavily hit by fighting, and that includes regions around Kiev, in Zaporizhia in the south, and some parts of Ukraine's northeast. Civilians in areas around the capital, including Irpin and Bucha to the northwest, will be evacuated into Kiev to escape fierce bombardment by Russian forces. Civilians have been braving shell fire and aerial bombardments to escape the cluster of towns on Kiev's northwestern edge, which have been largely occupied by Russian forces. An exploding shell killed 4 people who were trying to reach Kiev by foot on Sunday. Meanwhile, more than 5,000 people were evacuated from Sumy, a town of 250,000 that lies close to the Russian border and has been the scene of heavy fighting. Take a look.
Сьогодні нам вдалося організувати гуманітарний коридор з міста Суми до Полтави. Сотні людей врятовано, гуманітарний вантаж доставили, але це лише відсоток від того, що треба зробити і чого очікують наші люди, заблоковані українці. Ми готові, наші вантажі готові, наш транспорт готовий, але не люди. Вони не готові, вони обстрілюють маршрути евакуації.
Now, the convoys ferried the evacuees to the city of Lokvetsia, around 150 kilometers to the southwest in the Ukrainian-held territory. Ukrainian authorities say 21 people, including 2 children, were killed in airstrikes on the town on Monday. Kiev and its Western allies had rejected a previous proposal to evacuate Ukrainians to Russia and Belarus. Attempts to evacuate civilians from the besieged city of Mariupol failed again, with Ukraine accusing Russia of attacking a humanitarian corridor. Moscow announced a new humanitarian ceasefire in Ukraine for Wednesday morning to allow civilians to flee. In another development, U.S. intelligence chiefs branded Russia's Vladimir Putin an angry, isolated leader, craving global clout, frustrated about how his Ukraine invasion has not gone to plan, and lobbying provocative nuclear threats at the West. Take a look.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think Putin is determined to dominate and control Ukraine, to shape its orientation. This is a matter of deep personal conviction for him. He's been stewing in a combustible combination of grievance and ambition for many years. That personal conviction matters more than ever in the Russian system. He's created a system in which his own circle of advisors is narrower and narrower. COVID has made that even narrower. And it's a system in which it's not proven career enhancing for people to question or challenge his judgment. As you said, Mr. Chairman, I think Putin is angry and frustrated right now. He's likely to double down and try to grind down the Ukrainian military with no regard for civilian casualties.
President Putin took the shock step last month of putting Russia's nuclear forces on high alert. And some U.S. officials have privately expressed concern that in a worst-case scenario, he might order a deployment of such mini nukes on a city. Meanwhile, more than 2 million people have fled Ukraine since Russia launched its full-scale invasion less than 2 weeks ago, according to the United Nations. Take a look.
Are trapped.
The International Organization for Migration this morning reports more than 2 million people have fled Ukraine to neighboring states as a result of the ongoing war in that country. Among them are 103,000 third country nationals from dozens of countries. Obviously, the situation is very fluid and the numbers are changing on an hourly basis. These figures are collated to 0930 this morning, CET.
We've reached 2 million Ukrainian refugees in 12 days, and most of the countries that they're going to are Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, the Republic of Moldova, Romania, other European countries as well, and the Russian Federation and Belarus.
Turning my attention to Mariupol in particular, we have a situation here where hundreds of thousands of people are trapped in this city in dire conditions, fast running out of food, clean water, needed medical supplies. The situation is atrocious. We stand ready to act in terms of our neutral intermediary role to facilitate the safe passage of civilians out of the city. But the bottom line today is that this situation is really apocalyptic for people. It is getting worse. They are running out of essential supplies. And so our call today is really for life-saving aid to reach these people.
Meanwhile, EU Home Affairs Commissioner Ylva Johansson said she is worried about unaccompanied children being victims of trafficking, as the Commission unveils more proposals to help refugees fleeing the war in Ukraine. Take a look.
We need to provide more help for the children, and we also need to be aware that there are also people, criminals, that try to use this situation. There's a huge risk of unaccompanied children being victims of trafficking. There is a risk of people, criminals, try to use children, try to have false documents to get them into the European Union with the purpose of selling these children, of trafficking.
Meanwhile, the United Kingdom announced a series of new aviation sanctions on Russia, allowing the government to detain Russian aircraft and remove aircraft belonging to designated individuals and entities. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said the sanctions will inflict more economic pain on Russia and those close to the Kremlin. They've also strengthened the current overflight and landing ban on Russian aircraft, laying new legislation to make it a criminal offense for any Russian aircraft to fly or land in the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, the United States led a Western assault on Moscow's economic lifeline, banning imports of Russian oil as civilians fled besieged Ukrainian cities in a desperate evacuation push blighted by Russian shelling. President Joe Biden heralded the U.S. embargo as a hit on the main artery of Russia's economic, targeting President Vladimir Putin's most crucial source of revenue. Take a look.
So we can take this. Good morning, folks. Sorry to keep you waiting. It was a couple phone calls. Today, I'm announcing the United States is targeting the main artery of Russia's economy. we're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine. This is a move that has strong bipartisan support in Congress and, I believe, in the country. Americans have rallied to support their Ukrainian people and made it clear we will not be part of subsidizing Putin's war. We made this decision in close consultation with our allies and our partners around the world, particularly in Europe, because a united response to Putin's aggression has been my overriding focus, to keep all NATO and all of the EU and our allies totally united. We're moving forward with this ban, understanding that many of our European allies and partners may not be in a position to join us. The United States produces far more oil domestically than all the European countries combined. In fact, we're a net exporter of energy. So we can take this step when others cannot. But we're working closely with Europe and our partners to develop a long-term strategy to reduce their dependence on Russian energy as well.
Now, Britain said it would also join the United States in phasing out Russian oil by year's end, while oil giants BP and Shell announced an immediate halt to Russian oil and gas purchases. Russia has warned that oil sanctions would have catastrophic consequences. But the United States led the push, partly because Russia accounts for less than 10% of U.S. oil and petroleum imports, making the impact on the world's largest economy easier to bear. The European Union also said it would slash gas imports by 2/3. The EU wants to vastly reduce Russian gas imports this year as political pressure mounts to sever Russia's main economic lifeline over its invasion of Ukraine. Take a look.
By the end of this year, we can replace 100 BCM of gas imports from Russia. That is 2/3 of what we import from them. This will end our over-dependency and give us much-needed room to maneuver. It's hard, bloody hard, but it's possible if we're willing to go further and faster than we've done before.
In its plan, the EU said the bloc could become fully independent of Russian gas, oil, and coal by 2030. Mr. Timmermans urged caution, though. Russian supplies 40% of the EU's gas needs, with Italy, Germany, and several Central European countries especially dependent. A quarter of its oil supply also comes from Russia. Now, this reliance has led EU nations to push back against calls by Kiev and Washington to severely sanction Russia's energy sector as Western allies seek more ways to hit Russia harder for its actions in Ukraine. The proposal, which is not binding, calls for 90% of gas storage capacity to be filled by September 30, up from about 30% now. The recommendations from Brussels came just ahead of a meeting of EU leaders who will discuss ways to cut Europe's energy ties to Russia for the long term. In the suburbs of Mykolaiv, a city in southern Ukraine under Russian fire, a district of gray buildings damaged by war. The shell left a gaping hole on the second floor of one of the block, the metal door torn off, the windows blown out. Take a look.
Кидал коктейль Молотова, а потом бежал. И меня зацепило осколком потом, когда стреляли по мне уже.
А они там и танки, и БТР, и все. И теперь они там всех людей, ну кушать хочется, всех обчищают.
Now, doctors have already started treating war casualties. Alexander, a soldier in his 20s, had been rushed in with a broken leg and riddled with shrapnel after Russians hit his barracks on Monday. He said 8 of his comrades had been killed, another 8 had disappeared, and 18 more had been wounded. AFP could not independently verify these figures. The hospital's leading surgeon, Dmitry Sikorsky, said he had lost count of how many people had been brought in for treatment since Russia invaded the country on February 24. In the first days of the conflict, the hospital treated 160 soldiers, he said. And these days, however, patients were mostly civilians. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky said he is no longer pressing for NATO membership for Ukraine, a delicate issue that was one of Russia's stated reasons for invading its pro-Western neighbor. In another apparent nod aimed at placating Moscow, Zelensky said he is open to compromise on the status of two breakaway pro-Russian territories that President Putin recognized as independent just before unleashing the invasion on February 24. I have cooled down regarding this question a long time ago after we understood that NATO is not prepared to accept Ukraine, Zelensky said in an interview aired Monday night on ABC News. He said the alliance is afraid of controversial things and confrontation with Russia, the president added. Referring to NATO membership, Zelensky said through an interpreter that he doesn't want to be president of a country which is being something on its knees. Russia has said it doesn't want neighboring Ukraine to join NATO, the transatlantic alliance created at the start of the Cold War to protect Europe from the Soviet Union. In more recent years, the alliance has expanded further and further east to take in former Soviet bloc countries, infuriating the Kremlin. In other news, Iran announced it had successfully placed a military satellite in orbit as talks on reviving a 2015 nuclear deal between Tehran and major powers reach a critical stage. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps described Noor-2 as a reconnaissance satellite in a statement on its SEPA news website. It said the satellite was launched from the Sharu Desert in Semnan province, some 300 kilometers east of the capital. The United States has repeatedly voiced concern that such launches could boost Iran's ballistic missile technology, but Iran insists it is not seeking nuclear weapons and that its satellite and rocket launches are for civil or defensive purposes only. Iran successfully put its first military satellite into orbit in April 2020, drawing a sharp rebuke from Washington. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Mr. Bawal, may ibis ka, oh. Asan? It's a prank! Okay lang manakot. Pero kung mananakot ka para sa boto, bawal yan!
Ayon sa Omnibus Election Code, threats, intimidation, terrorism, use of fraudulent device or other forms of coercion is an election offense.
Sino kausap mo? Makaalis na nga, sa iba na lang ako mananakot. Mr. Pwede! Mr. Pwede! May malaking ibis sa likod mo! Nox! Babawi ka pa, ha? Di mo ako maiisahan! Ako si Mr. Bawal na nagpapaalala sa inyo na ang pananakot para sa boto. Ibis! Hoy! Bawal yan!
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
Karapatan natin lahat na iboto ang karapat-dapat! Tama! Lahat ng Pilipino pwedeng bumoto!
Kung rehistrado ka.
Ha?
Ang lahat ng Pilipinong rehistrado lamang ang maaaring bumoto. 1 taon ang ibinibigay ng Commission on Elections para magparehistro ang mga Pilipinong boboto sa darating na eleksyon. Kailangan gawin ito para maiwasan ang tinatawag na flying voters. Teka, lahat ba kayo nagparehistro na?
Opo! Rehistrado na kami lahat!
Bakit tahimik ka? Hindi ka nakapagrehistro, no?
Nakakalimutan ko.
Ay, hindi ka pwedeng bumoto. Mabuti pa, bumili ka na lang ng balot.
Pagka gabi pa bumili ng balot, pwede na kami bumoto.
Hindi, pero mabubusog ka. Para sa karagdagang kaalaman, makipag-ugnayan lang sa pinakamalapit na barangay o bisitahin ang COMELEC website.
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. It's crazy expensive. It's getting even more expensive every day. That is according to a student, Demi Saygili, at Washington, D.C. at a gas station, as the conflict in Ukraine has sent fuel prices soaring in the United States. Take a look.
I think it's crazy expensive. It's getting even more expensive every day, especially for students. It's getting really hard to afford it. So now we're gonna have to carpool.
We are immigrants. We are from Argentina, so we live in a country where all prices, like you have inflation all around. So we are kind of used to deal with that. But in 8 years that we have this business, we have never ever risen our prices, and now we're starting to raise our prices.
I need to drive for work, and so it is what it is. It's high, but nothing I can do about it.
It's rough, but it's understandable, especially considering the current geopolitical climate that we're in. And hopefully it'll get more people buying electric cars and pushed away from fossil fuels and more to renewables. But yeah, it's not fun.
Americans are now paying an average of $4.17 per gallon, a 72% increase in just 1 month, and the highest price at the pump since the global economic downturn of 2008. Bottom line is that the USA would feel some impact to the loss of supplies from Russia, but we are in a far better position than Europe. That is according to energy analyst Andy Lippo. The Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, has ordered all wage boards across the country to look into the needs to increase the salaries of workers amid soaring oil prices. Take a look.
So, inactivate ko agad yung ating wage board, no? Kasi sila naman ang mandated to continue monitoring our wage level, and then based on their assessment of the economic factors and in consultation with the major stakeholders who are also members of the wage board, by the way, Harold. Diyan sa wage board na yan, represented ang mga employees in the same way that the employers are also properly represented. Kaya itong grupo na ito, this tripartite council na ito, ang siyang nag-aaral together with our economic advisors ng NEDA at ang DTI. Sila ang tuloy-tuloy na nag-o-obserba o nag-a-assess sa socio-economic factors in all the regions, especially here in Metro Manila. And on the basis of that, meron tinatawag na anniversary initiative. Halimbawa, dapat every year merong review ang ating wage board, and based on the review, they can recommend wage adjustment. Pero ngayon, even before na darating yung period na yon, kailangan ma-activate na yung ating wage board dahil meron ng pending petition for wage increases. In fact nga, merong isang petition not only addressed to us but also addressed to Congress, petitioning that the minimum wage should be increased to 750 pesos per day. Yun ang isang petition. And there are other petitions. Isang petition is requesting that yung salary level should all be the same from Region 1 to Region 13. Dapat pare-pareho. Hindi kagaya ngayon na Region NCR 537, Region 3 400, Region 4 470, ganun. In my region 340, ganun. So ang gusto nila, pare-pareho na lang. Yun ang kanilang petition. That is why in my meeting with some of members of the wage board, sinabi ko, it's probably time for you to work on this petition and see how we can address the concern of this petition, taking into account the position of our stakeholders, meaning the employers and the employees.
Now, Bello said the unabated fuel price hikes, which have been worsened by the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, may be a compelling ground for the wage boards to recommend adjustments in the minimum wages of workers. Meanwhile, Hong Kong carrier Cathay Pacific today posted a loss of just over $703 million for last year, a massive improvement on the record loss suffered in 2020, even as the airline struggled with tough travel restrictions. Chairman Patrick Healy said the company continued to face serious challenges, and the overall loss for the year was substantial, despite a considerable improvement in the second half. Cathay's result was a vast improvement from its record losses of 21.6 billion Hong Kong dollars or $2.8 billion US dollars in 2020, which Healy described as the most challenging year in the airline's 7-decade history. Hong Kong has imposed some of the world's harshest travel restrictions under its zero COVID policy, isolating a city that was once one of the world's largest logistics and transportation hubs. Cathay said passenger numbers were down 85% from 2020, with the airline flying just 1,965 passengers a day on average in 2021, and a far cry from the 35.2 million transported in pre-COVID 2019. President Joe Biden on Wednesday will order government agencies to begin work on creating a digital U.S. dollar, according to White House officials. Amid the explosive rise of private cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, The U.S. effort will study benefits and potential risks while placing urgency on research and development of a potential United States CBDC, according to a statement. The world's largest economy will join more than 100 countries that are exploring or have launched pilot programs with their own central bank digital currency or CBDC, including China's digital yuan. Officials rejected the notion that Washington is late to the effort. The implications of potentially issuing a digital dollar are profound, according to one official, telling reporters, stressing the crucial role of the American currency in the global economy. Biden's executive order will call on agencies, including the Treasury Department, to examine issues including consumer protection, financial inclusion, and the use of digital assets for illicit activities. Digital assets, including cryptocurrencies, have been explosive or have seen explosive growth in recent years, surpassing a $3 trillion market cap last November from just $14 billion just 5 years prior. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Mobile Legends!
Bida sa pelikula, sa commercials, sa game shows, sa puso mo.
Welcome sa ating bagong show! Kung saan hindi ako, pero kayo ang bida.
Mga kwentong may puso at tumatago sa puso.
Gusto ko lang po talagang ma-share sa kanila na they are not alone.
Gumawa ka ng kabutihan kahit mawala na yung kita mo lahat. Bida!
Tinuruan namin yung mga magulang kung paano gumawa ng mga localized solar.
Pati ang mga home daddies, kasama sa kwentuhan. Kaya maging bidarkada na kasama ng ating feel-good host, Aga Mulak.
Let's be the light of kindness in this world. Ito po ang Bida Kayo kay Aga.
Para makasama ka, handang hanapin ka sa dulo ng mundo. Lahat ay pupuntahan ko.
Hello, we are Quelio. Please catch us on Letters and Music on air and online this March 12 from 1 to 2 p.m. Only here in Net 25. See ya!
Marami mang pagbabagong dala ang pandemya sa bansa, hindi naman nito na bago ang katatagan, pagsusumikap at diskarte ng mga Pilipino. For them, it's business as usual when it comes to developing and offering world-class products and services. In this episode, we will talk about the Philippine entertainment and advertising industry with Arnold Vega-Fria, chairman of ALV Group of Companies. Listen to inspiring stories and tips on how small businesses can navigate the new normal as we feature outstanding business leaders and personalities at the Global Trends Business Leaders Awards 2022. All these in this episode of Open for Business.
Gusto niyo bang magkaroon ng tsansang manalo ng 5,000 pesos na nasa bahay lang kayo? Manood lang ng Tara Game agad-agad mula simula hanggang katapusan para makuha ang mga sagot sa dalawang Tara Game questions of the night. Punta lang sa www.net25.com, pindutin ang Tara Game Sagot Agad-Agad logo, mag-register at isubmit ang mga sagot mo para magkaroon ka ng entry. Ang dali lang, natuwa ka na, posible ka pang manalo ng 5,000 pesos. Ang dali lang nito. O ano, sali na sa Tara Game Sagot Agad-Agad promo!
Araw-araw may bagong kaalaman. Dahil sa Tony Knows, everybody knows! Your Kuya Tony Petgaba na hindi naubusan ng tips. Siyempre, from DIY to life hacks, sagot ko na yan. Saan ka pa? Let's all play together. Let's have fun together. Tara na, sumali at makigulo sa aming Kada Challenge. Sa kada umaga, kumpleto na ang inyong umaga.
Abangan ang mga istorya ng pagbangon sa Season 2 ng Lingap Stories tuwing Linggo, alas 5 ng hapon sa Net25.
Welcome back. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant is no longer transmitting data to the UN's atomic watchdog, according to the agency, as it voiced concern for staff working under Russian guard at the Ukrainian facility. On February 24, Russia invaded Ukraine and seized the defunct plant, site of a 1986 disaster that killed hundreds and spread radioactive contamination west across Europe. International Atomic Energy Agency Chief Rafael Grossi indicated that remote data transmission from safeguards monitoring systems installed at the Chernobyl NPP had been lost. That is a statement from the agency. More than 200 technical staff and guards remain trapped at the site, working 13 days straight since the Russian takeover. The situation for the staff was worsening at the site, the IAEA said, citing the Ukrainian nuclear regulator. The defunct plant sits inside an exclusion zone that houses decommissioned reactors as well as radioactive waste facilities. More than 2,000 staff still work at the plant, as it requires constant management to prevent another nuclear disaster. The UN agency called on Russia to allow workers to rotate because rest and regular shifts were crucial to the site's safety. Meanwhile, IAEA Chief Rafael Mariano Grossi reiterated an offer to travel to Chernobyl or elsewhere to ensure the safety of Ukraine's nuclear sites. Let's listen in.
Then there is the issue of the place and the logistics, which are not easy at a time of war. Initially, we proposed to come to Chernobyl. Chernobyl was the first facility in Ukraine being seized by the military forces of the Russian Federation. It was obvious that my first intent was to go there because it was the first place where we're having arrangements, ad hoc arrangements, to try to maintain the contact with the site and to maintain the necessary. My offer still stands. We heard from the Russian Federation that they would rather do it somewhere else. But this is going to be part of a process of consultation, and where we are going to be listening to the Russian side and to the Ukrainian side, and see what is possible in terms of a place and other modalities, which, as I said, are going to be extremely difficult. But we have to do it. There is no way. I said it today. We should not be losing time. Almost every day there is a new episode. The episode last Friday on the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant was extreme, perhaps, but there are some other episodes which indicate that we need to have an agreed, clear framework of what is supposed to be done.
Meanwhile, South Korea's military reported that its military fired warning shots at a North Korean patrol boat that crossed the de facto inter-Korean sea border off the peninsula's west coast. South Korea said it had repatriated 7 North Korean crew a day after Seoul's Navy seized their boat and fired a warning shot at a patrol vessel for crossing the maritime border. The crew members told authorities they had crossed the maritime border due to a navigation error and mechanical problem and asked to return to the north, according to the Defense Ministry. A North Korean patrol boat had also crossed the de facto maritime border off the west coast of the peninsula early on Tuesday while chasing the southbound vessel, according to the Defense Ministry. The South's Navy fired a warning shot at the North Korean patrol boat, which turned around and headed back to the north, according to an official. Small skirmishes occasionally break out along the inter-Korean border, but it is the first time a North Korean military vessel has crossed the NLL, or the so-called Northern Limit Line, since the two countries signed a 2018 military agreement meant to reduce tensions, according to Chun In-bum, a retired South Korean lieutenant general. And South Koreans are casting votes today for a new president, wrapping up a campaign marked by high-profile corruption allegations and bitter personal attacks. The Liberal candidate, former provincial governor Lee Mae-young, and his conservative rival, ex-prosecutor Yoon Suk-yeol, are locked in a tight race ahead of the vote. They are vying to replace outgoing President Moon Jae-in, who is constitutionally barred from running for a second 5-year term. South Korea faces no shortage of urgent issues, including skyrocketing housing prices, high youth unemployment, and a pandemic-induced economic slowdown. But debate over those issues has been overshadowed by ferocious mudslinging between the two candidates, which many observers say has reached unprecedented levels. Both candidates are extremely unpopular. Opinion polls suggest, leading many media outlets to refer to the race as the election of the unfavorables. A winner is not expected to be declared until early Thursday, since the race is seen as one of the closest in South Korea's history. Meanwhile, economic strength is a priority for Americans in the latest poll. Rafaela Tigno from our Los Angeles Bureau reports.
It is no secret that this pandemic and other pressing issues such as making ends meet and international conflict have made many Americans weary of what is to come within this year. Still, many citizens have high expectations from the current administration on how their lives can be improved. In a recent public opinion poll from Pew Research Center, Americans reveal what they consider high priorities, which in turn can provide data in assisting leaders in their strategies to address such concerns. Like many years before, this poll has found that strengthening the economy is the top issue for Americans, as 71% polled place this first on their list of what matters most to them. These opinions likely stem from a combination of rising costs for basic necessities like food, gas, healthcare, and housing prices. In addition, many matters that related to the economy, such as increasing jobs and bettering their pay rate, improving education to obtain such jobs, and especially working towards helping Americans in poverty, also polled at level from 40 to 60%, indicating that the era of pandemic has made securing a stable career and future a much more difficult task than before. However, the number of Americans concerned about the pandemic has decreased from 78% in 2021 to only 60% in 2022. Young people 18 to 49 years old are significantly less likely to consider the pandemic a pressing issue compared to their older counterparts, who may be worried that they are still vulnerable to catching the virus. Lastly, this poll was able to capture American opinions regarding the tension between Russia and the US, especially in light of the military situation involving Russia and Ukraine. In early January, a third of Americans polled reported they did not know much about the reasoning behind these two countries' conflict, and another third considered the military buildup of Russia near Ukraine's border as a major threat. Concerns related to terrorism, war, and economic decline are likely to rise as uncertainty and speculation plagues Americans from getting a clear view of what to expect from Russia and the US. The fact that Americans hold a laundry list of goals for their government and an expectation that clear and accessible information and result will follow demonstrate the enormity of the work that must be done as more difficult times continue to manifest. Rafaela Tigno, Eagle News, Los Angeles.
Thank you, Rafaela. Hong Kong's leader said that mandatory coronavirus testing was no longer a priority after plans for mass screening of all 7.4 million residents and an accompanying citywide lockdown triggered panic. 2 weeks ago, Carrie Lam had said all residents would need to undergo 3 rounds of compulsory testing, setting off alarm in the densely populated city, currently in the throes of a deadly Omicron-fueled wave. But Wednesday's announcement marked a rollback, as authorities have now pivoted to using rapid tests instead of PCR tests to determine the city's estimated cases, according to Lam. A large number of rapid tests are already being used, which has already allowed us to understand Hong Kong's situation pretty well, she said. Despite 2 years of hard-won breathing room, thanks to the mainland's zero-COVID strategy, Hong Kong now has one of the world's highest fatality rates. The majority of the deaths are elderly, among the most vaccine hesitant in the city. Fewer than 60% of people 70 and above have received 2 jabs. Health experts, including Hong Kong's top pandemic advisor, have expressed doubts over the effectiveness of the mass testing, especially since the city currently lacks sufficient isolation facilities. And Ontario lifted capacity limits in some indoor public spaces, including restaurants, gyms, and cinemas. Here's April Masongsong from our EBC Canada Bureau.
This week in Ontario, all capacity restrictions are lifted and vaccination requirements are now removed. As of Tuesday, March 1st, proof of vaccination is no longer required at most Ontario establishments like restaurants, cinemas, and gyms. Capacity limits are also lifted on social gathering sizes. Premier Doug Ford says that requiring proof of vaccination has always been a time-limited restriction. COVID cases and hospitalizations have fallen since January, though PCR testing has also been limited. Some establishments, like the Toronto Zoo, have chosen to keep vaccination requirements and masking policy, regardless of the province lifting these restrictions. At a press conference earlier this week, the Premier has mentioned that the province isn't far from dropping the province-wide mask mandate. The Children's Health Coalition, a collective of children's health organizations in Ontario, have released a statement as a response to this possibility. For now, let's ensure kids remain as healthy as they can in schools by keeping masks on. Masking in indoor school settings protects children and their families. As soon as the evidence suggests otherwise, then alternatives can be considered. Opposition party, the Ontario NDP, says that vaccine certificates keep all Ontarians safe, and that by framing them as restrictions, Ford is sending a dangerous signal that appeases a small minority of anti-vaxxers and occupiers. April Masongsong, Eagle News, Toronto.
And that's all we have for you tonight. As always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert and stay informed because we live in interesting times. Good night.
Welcome to Mobile Legends!
isasayaw kita. Ika'y mahalaga para sa akin.
Hi guys, ako si JD at abangan nyo ako bilang isang guest performer sa Letters and Music itong darating na Sabado, March 12, 1 to 2 p.m. Siyempre, dito lamang sa Net25. See you po!
Ani, ano ba? Yung anak natin, patahimikin mo na, patahanin mo.
Ayoko. Weird ng anak natin na yan. Hi, ako po yung nag-a-apply. Marunong ako magluto?
Sana nga, maluto mo yung mga paborito namin pagkain.
Alam na namin ang sikreto ng dalawa.
Oo nga! Bakit hawak mo yan? Couple's necklace na yan.
Binigay sa amin ni Esmigong yan.
Esmigong?
Panoorin ang mga bentang-bentang hirit ng mga tara-gamers nating tindero at tindera. Anong kulay ang asin dati, 25 years ago?
Brown.
Magkano itong isda nyo? Yan ba isda nyo? Fresh ba yan?
Parehas ang timbangan. Parehas na parehas, parang ang tindera lang.
Ngayong linggo sa Tara Game! Agad! Alas 7 ng gabi sa Net25.
Bida sa pelikula, sa commercials, sa game shows, sa puso mo.
Welcome sa ating bagong show! Kung saan hindi ako, pero kayo ang bida.
Mga kwentong may puso at tumatago sa puso.
Gusto ko lang po talagang ma-share sa kanila na they are not alone.
Gumawa ka ng kabutihan kahit mawala na yung kita mo lahat. Bida!
Tinuruan namin yung mga magulang kung paano gumawa ng mga localized solar.
Pati ang mga home daddies, kasama sa kwentuhan. Kaya maging bidarkada na kasama ng ating feel-good host, Aga Mulak.
Let's be the light of kindness in this world. Ito po ang Bida Kayo kay Aga.
Marami mang pagbabagong dala ang pandemya sa bansa, hindi naman nito na bago ang katatagan, pagsusumikap at diskarte ng mga Pilipino. For them, it's business as usual when it comes to developing and offering world-class products and services. In this episode, we will talk about the Philippine entertainment and advertising industry with Arnold Vegafria, chairman of ALV Group of Companies. Listen to inspiring stories and tips on how small businesses can navigate the new normal as we feature outstanding business leaders and personalities at the Global Trends Business Leaders Awards 2022. All these in this episode of Open for Business.
Maraming salamat po, kapatid na Eduardo B. Manalo.
Maraming salamat po sa kapatid na Eduardo B. Manalo.
Maraming salamat po, kapatid na Eduardo B. Manalo.
Karamiwan na kami po'y hinahamak at tinataboy. Pero buong puso niyo kaming tinanggap at kinupkop. Kung dati, kung saan kami naninirahan, ngayon may permanente na kaming tirahan.
Maraming salamat sa kabuhayang pinagkaloob niyo. Hindi na po kami mangangamba sa aming kinabukasan.
Maraming salamat po sa pagbibigay ng nikasyon sa amin upang matupad na ang aming mga pangarap.
Mahal na mahal po namin kayo.
Ano man ang iyong mithiin, maaasahan mo ako. Matinding pagsubok may danasin, pagbangon ay karamay ako. Noon pa may itinuring, di ka na iba sa akin. Kaya na sa ating pagsulang, pangarap natin abutin. Ano man ang adhikain, katuwang mo'y ako pa rin. Tuwid at mabuting layunin, ipagmamalaki natin. Ganda ng ating kultura, sining natin at musika, kailan may tatangkilikin, iisang ating damdamin. Isa tayo sa bawat hapangin, isa tayo tuwing may abutin. Di ba't noon pa man, alam mo yan since day one, ikaw ako tayo, we are one. Magkasama tayo, hirapan ang danasin, ligaya tagumpay, tayong magkapiling. Di ba't noon pa man, alam mo yan since day one, ikaw ako tayo, we are one. Sa mahaba nating lakbayin, ako pa rin ang kapiling. Sa paglipad, sa pagtawid dagat, ako pa rin ang kaakibat. Saan man tayo abuti, katapatan isulong natin, dakila nating hangarin, itataguyod iringgin. Isa tayo sa bawat hapangin, isa tayo tuwing may abutin. Di ba't noon pa man, alam mo yan since day one, ikaw ako tayo, we are one. Tagumpay natin, tiyak na kakamtin, panalangin natin, tunay na tiringgin. Di ba noon pa man, alam mo yan since day one, ikaw ako tayo, we are one. Ikaw ako tayo, we are
Ang susunod na programa ay rated PG. Ito ay nangangailangan ng